earlier if they like to wait for things. I'm wondering how many adults like to wait for things. Are you guys good at waiting for things? I suppose it depends on what you're waiting for, whether it's something big or little, and maybe it depends on how long you've been waiting for it. If you think about times in your life when you've had to wait for something, have you learned any lessons during those times? Have you learned some lessons in trust, in maybe leaning on God during those times when you're waiting? But what if you don't know what you're waiting for or when exactly it will come? Sometimes waiting is really hard. My son, Paul, who's over there, has a really hard time waiting. He's so excited about every single thing that happens in life that he just wants it all to happen right now. When he turned 5, he was so excited. And when he'd been 5 for a month, he said, "How old am I now?" And I said, "Well, you're still 5. And he said, "What? I've been 5 forever." And so I said, "Actually, you're 5 and 1/12." And so ever since then, we've been breaking this year up into fractions. He's made it through 5 and 1/6, 5 and 1/4, 5 and 1/3, 5 and a half. He made it through 5 and 7/12, closing in on 5 and 2/3. He is making progress. He just can't stand the idea of being stuck, just waiting at 5. He's got to know he's making progress. Waiting. It is very hard for all of us. One aspect of this account of Jesus' ascension actually has to do with waiting. Because the ascension story isn't just about what happened to Jesus, how he ascended into heaven, but it's also how it impacted those followers, those disciples who were with him all the time. They had to learn what it meant to be separated from him and to see what the next part of the plan was. But I need to be very clear about what the ascension is not. The ascension of Jesus is not a story about how one time Jesus was close to some people on earth and then he went up into heaven and he was far away from people and he was closed off from people and all of their needs. That is not what the ascension story is about at all. The ascension story is about how Jesus completed one part of God's mission and now another part of God's plan was going to unfold. So Jesus' mission was to be born on earth, to show us who God was in the flesh, in the person of Jesus. He lived and he taught and he did all of these things to reveal who God is. And then he died on a cross for us and he rose from the dead and then he ascended into heaven so God's next part of the plan could take place. When Jesus ascended into heaven, then God was going to have the Holy Spirit be part of our lives with us. So as Jesus ascended, Jesus said, "The Holy Spirit is coming." That's the part of God that actually can dwell in us and be with us. Another word for Holy Spirit in the Bible is wind and breath. And we're very familiar with wind since it damaged one of our umbrellas already today. But also breath is another way to describe the Holy Spirit. It's that part of God that is so close to us that actually empowers us to be Jesus's hands and feet in the world. But remember, those disciples, those friends of Jesus, as they're watching the ascension, they only get to see one part of the plan. They don't know what's coming next. All Jesus told them to do was wait. I can imagine them calling up to Jesus as he's like going up into the sky. "Hey, wait, Jesus. Okay, wait, when is the Holy Spirit coming? What does the Holy Spirit look like? How will we know that the Holy Spirit's here? What if we miss the Holy Spirit? Hey, Jesus, we got a whole bunch of questions." These disciples were a bunch of young people who were used to being on the move. Their whole experience with Jesus was about movement. They first got to know Jesus when he said, "Hey, come and follow me." And ever since that point, they followed him to all kinds of places. Jesus said, "Follow me to the sick people and we're going to heal them. Follow me to the hungry people and we're going to feed them. Follow me to the outcast people and we're going to be their family. Follow me to all of these important places that you wouldn't normally go on your own. Follow me there." Then he said, "Follow me to the cross." and they followed him and witnessed him dying on the cross, then followed him to the tomb, but he wasn't there anymore, and then follow him these 40 days after the resurrection to learn more from him. And then he said, follow me to the outskirts of Jerusalem, and I've got one more thing to tell you. And the thing that he tells them is wait, as he ascends up into heaven. And they don't know what is next and what that next stage looks like when the Holy Spirit will come and be with them. All they see is a big Holy Spirit-shaped question mark. They're stuck waiting. Waiting is hard. I think waiting makes most of us feel really anxious. Waiting can make us feel kind of fearful. Waiting can make us feel kind of hopeless and despairing, because what if the thing we're waiting for doesn't happen, or it doesn't happen in the way that we'd like it to happen? What if we miss out on something? Waiting is really, really hard. So when you think of the times in your life when you've had to wait, are there things that you've learned? Are there certain techniques you've deployed and employed for waiting? Do you just distract yourself and binge watch Netflix until the next thing happens? I'm a big fan of binge watching Netflix, but I mean in moderation. By the way, House of Cards was released yesterday, the newest season, and I haven't started watching it yet because I wanted to be well rested for today. But is that what you do to wait? Do you just distract yourself and tune out? I have a lovely picture in your bulletin and your song sheet. They didn't turn out that lovely, actually, of two people kind of lazily binge watching Netflix. Is that the way you wait? Or are there other ways we can wait, where we can actually learn something in our waiting? The next picture I have, besides the people watching TV, is a picture of the Jamaican Olympic runner Usain Bolt crouching down on the starting blocks. That's also a picture of waiting, but it's not a passive, zoned out type of waiting. It's an engaged type of waiting. Usain Bolt is harnessing all of his muscles. He's harnessing the adrenaline that's pumping. He's getting prepared. He's focusing on what he needs to so that when the starting gun goes off, he can actually be propelled forward and run as fast as he can. The kind of waiting we see in that picture of Usain Bolt is very different than zoning out and watching Netflix. So I wonder, if we think back to what the disciples were doing in their time of waiting, I wonder what they focused on or how they got through that time of waiting. We know they didn't have Netflix back then, but I wonder if they focused on something that helped them get through their time of waiting for when the Holy Spirit would come to them. I found a piece of artwork that actually has a cool detail that makes my imagination think about what they were focusing on. And it's not my style of artwork, and it didn't photocopy very well, but it's an etching from the 1500s of the Ascension by the famous etcher Albrecht Dürer. Any Albrecht Dürer fans? And didn't anybody take art history? I totally remember learning about this guy. Okay, but he has this picture of the Ascension, and for those of you who don't have a song sheet, I'll describe it to you. In the top of this piece of art, you just see Jesus's feet sticking out of the top, because it's made to show that Jesus is ascending to heaven, and the only thing we can see are his feet with sandals. And he's supposedly on a mountaintop, but for some reason, Albrecht Dürer kind of depicted the mountaintop as a big haystack, and it looks like Jesus is lifting off of a tall haystack, and the disciples are all standing around this haystack, which I think is supposed to be a mountain. And why can't they be on the mountain with him? Why does it show them surrounding this haystack? But Albrecht Dürer inserted a detail that's not in the biblical account. He actually inserted something that's on top of the haystack. Does anybody see it? I have a close-up next to it. Can anybody see what the detail is? And do you see footprints? Footprints. I love that. Those footprints are right at the disciples' eye level. So as Jesus ascends and they're freaking out about what it means to wait, What they have left is those imprints, those footprints that Jesus left on that mountain. And if they focused on that, that might give them a clue for how to prepare for what happens next. Because where did Jesus' footprints go throughout his life? As I said, Jesus took them to all of these places they wouldn't have naturally gone by themselves. He took them to people who were sick, people who were lonely, people who were hungry, people who were outcast. He took them to all of those places to show God's presence to them. And if the disciples kept their eyes on those footprints as they were gearing up for the Holy Spirit, that might prepare them to go where the Holy Spirit was going to lead them. Because when the Holy Spirit did come, if you keep on reading the book of Acts, which we're actually going to do throughout the month of June, and we invite you to come to our teaching series throughout the month of June, we're calling it Failing Forward, because these disciples didn't know what they were going to be doing, but the Holy Spirit kept pushing them forward. But I'm not going to get into that yet, but it's really exciting. They're failing forward. But if they kept their eyes on those footprints, they could be ready when that Holy Spirit came to be empowered to move out to those places again, where God would be sending them. The Holy Spirit can't be captured in a piece of artwork, because the Holy Spirit isn't a thing but a driving force. It's not like a person. The Holy Spirit is that driving force that fills us, that sustains us, that dwells with us, but that also pushes us out of our comfort zones and shatters all the stereotypes and all of the ways that we know how to do things. The Holy Spirit pushes us into new places in God's name so that we can be Jesus's hands and feet for each other, so that we can show each other God's presence. That's a pretty exciting thing. But we're all in times of waiting. So we don't just need to think about what the disciples had to focus on. I would actually like to challenge all of us in whatever we're waiting for right now. How can we focus on Jesus's footsteps and on the presence of the Holy Spirit with us? Because we have the Holy Spirit, we are not left alone. I know that there's people who are graduating from high school. I see some high school graduates. They're waiting to see what the next chapter of their life will look like. There's others who have graduated from college or other degree programs, and they're waiting, what is my life going to look like in this next chapter? There's other people who are waiting to get a job if they've been unemployed for a long time, and what will it look like, and what kind of job will I get? There are people who are waiting to hear results from a doctor. What's the prognosis? Or is my cancer in remission? There's a lot of things that people are waiting to hear from their doctors. There's people who are waiting to see if there will be someone who will come into their life that they can share their life with and build a life together with that person. There's people who are waiting for the birth of a child. There's people who are wondering and waiting if they'll ever get pregnant or if they'll ever be able to have children or what their future family might look like. There's people who are waiting for retirement. There's people who are waiting for all sorts of things, or even if you're in your newest stage of life, maybe you're just waiting to get the hang of it. We're all waiting, but we can wait engaged, knowing that the Holy Spirit is with us, knowing that God is still moving and leading even when we're in a time of waiting. Here at Good Shepherd, we are a moving and shaking church. We want to be about God's work in this world, but we're also waiting for things too. We're waiting to have enough support to build this education wing on the other side of the gym. We're also waiting to start another satellite campus at the Sanctuary Event Center in Fargo. We don't know how all of these projects will shape up, but we're following the Spirit. We know that God is leading us, and God will lead us to people that we never expected to be worshiping with in Fargo, and maybe people who will come to be educated together with us about our God in the new education space. There's a lot of things we're waiting for. My son is waiting to be 6. He doesn't know what that means, but he asks questions every day, like, when I'm 6, will I be able to help mow the lawn? When I'm 6, will I finally get the Millennium Falcon Lego set? There's a lot of concerns he's thinking about. But even as we wait, our God is moving. Our God is acting. Our God is with us.